Yoshihiro Hattori was a Japanese exchange student residing in Louisiana, United States at the time of his death. Hattori was killed when he was on his way to a Halloween party and went to the wrong house by accident. Born in Nagoya, Japan, to Masaichi and Miko Hattori, Yoshihiro was 16 years old when he went to Baton Rouge as part of the American Field Service Student Exchange Program. He had also received a scholarship from the Morita Foundation for his trip. He was the middle child between a brother and a sister, and was described as a gregarious teen who played on his high school rugby team and loved fishing. 2 months into his stay in the United States, he received an invitation along with Webb Haymaker, his homestay brother, to a Halloween party organized for Japanese exchange students on October 17, 1992. Hattori went dressed in a tuxedo in imitation of John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever. Upon their arrival in the quiet working-class neighborhood where the party was held, the boys mistook the residence for their intended destination due to the similarity of the address and the Halloween decorations on the outside of the house, and proceeded to step out of their car and walk to the front door. The house belonged to Bonnie Pierce and Rodney Pierce. Hattori and Haymaker rang the front doorbell, but seemingly receiving no response, began to walk back to their car. Meanwhile, inside the house, their arrival had not gone unnoticed. Bonnie Pierce had peered out the side door and saw them. Mrs. Pierce, startled, retreated inside, locked the door, and said to her husband, "Rodney, get your gun." Hattori and Haymaker were walking to their car when the carport door was opened again, this time by Mr. Pierce. He was armed with a loaded revolver. He pointed it at Hattori and yelled, "Freeze!" Simultaneously, Hattori stepped back towards the house, saying, "We're here for the party." Haymaker, seeing the weapon, shouted after Hattori, but Pierce fired his weapon at point-blank range at Hattori, hitting him in the chest, and then ran back inside. Haymaker rushed to Hattori, badly wounded and lying where he fell, on his back. Haymaker ran to the home next door for help. Neither Mr. Pierce nor his wife came out of their house until the police arrived, about 40 minutes after the shooting. Mrs. Pierce shouted to the neighbors to go away when the neighbor called for help. One of the Pierce's children later told the police that her mother asked, "Why did you shoot him?" The shot had pierced the upper and lower lobes of Hattori's left lung and exited through the area of the seventh rib. He died in the ambulance minutes later from loss of blood. Initially, the local police quickly questioned and released Mr. Pierce and declined to charge him with any crime. They felt that Pierce had been within his rights in shooting the trespasser. Only after the governor of Louisiana and the New Orleans Japanese consul general protested was Mr. Pierce charged with manslaughter. His defense was his claim that Hattori had an extremely unusual manner of moving that any reasonable person would find scary. At the trial, Mr. Pierce testified about the moment just prior to the shooting, saying, "It was a person coming from behind the car, moving real fast. At that point, I pointed the gun and hollered, 'Freeze!' The person kept coming towards me, moving very erratically. At that time, I hollered for him to stop. He didn't. He kept moving forward. I remember him laughing. I was scared to death. This person was not gonna stop. He was gonna do harm to me. I had no choice. I want Yoshi's parents to understand that I'm sorry for everything." District Attorney concentrated on establishing that it had not been reasonable for Mr. Pierce, a 6'2", well-armed man, to be so fearful of a polite, friendly, unarmed, 130-pound boy who rang the doorbell, even if he walked towards him unexpectedly in the driveway, and that Pierce was not justified in using deadly force. Attorney stated, "It started with the ringing of the doorbell. No masks, no disguises. People ringing doorbells are not attempting to make unlawful entry. They didn't walk to the backyard. They didn't start peeking in the windows. A police detective testified that Pierce had said to him, "Boy, I messed up. I made a mistake." The defense argued that Mr. Pierce was in large part reacting reasonably to his wife's panic. Mrs. Pierce testified for an hour describing the incident, during which she also broke into tears several times, saying, "He was coming real fast, and it just clicked in my mind that he was going to hurt us. I slammed the door and locked it. I took 2 steps into the living room, where Rod could see me, and I could see him. I told him to get the gun." Mr. Pierce did not hesitate or question her, but instead went to retrieve a handgun with a laser sight that was stored in a suitcase in the bedroom, which he said was the easiest, most accessible gun to me. The trial lasted 7 days. After the jurors deliberated for 3¼ hours, Mr. Pierce was acquitted. The court found Mr. Pierce liable to Hattori's parents for $650,000 in damages, which they used to establish 2 charitable funds in their son's name, one to fund U.S. high school students wishing to visit Japan, and one to fund organizations that lobby for gun control. The lawyers for Hattori's parents argued that the Pierces had behaved unreasonably. Bonnie overreacted to the presence of 2 teens outside her house. The Pierces behaved unreasonably by not communicating with each other to convey what exactly the threat was. They had not taken the best path to safety, remaining inside the house and calling police. They had erred in taking offensive action rather than defensive action, and Rodney had used his firearm too quickly, without assessing the situation, using a warning shot or shooting to wound. Furthermore, the much larger Pierce could likely very easily have subdued the short, slightly built teen. Contrary to Mr. Pierce's claims that Hattori was moving strangely and quickly towards him, forensic evidence demonstrates that Hattori was moving slowly or not at all, and his arms were away from his body, indicating he was no threat. Overall, a far greater show of force was used than was appropriate. Out of the total compensation, only $100,000 has been paid by an insurance company. After the trial, Pierce told the press that he would never again own a gun. The shooting incident was fictionalized on the television show Homicide: Life on the Street, wherein the cousin of one of the detectives shoots a Turkish exchange student who mistakenly goes to the wrong house on Halloween. Unlike in the Hattori incident, the fictionalized version involves the student dressed as Gene Simmons from the band Kiss, acting strangely and even aggressively towards the shooter.